Hello everyone. In this video we are going to talk about variables. Variables are important in any program in order to do something meaningful. तो हम देखेंगे कि variables को हम किस तरह से declare कर सकते हैं, initialize कर सकते हैं और उसको use कैसे कर सकते हैं. So generally हमें different तरह के mathematical और arithmetic operations perform करने के लिए variables चाहिए होंगे. But before we start, this is pretty much the skeleton that you are going to need in all of your programs. और इसको हमने last वीडियो में एक्सप्लेन किया था कि these are the pre-processor directives which makes sure कि iStream is included before the rest of the code is executed. Namespace basically resolves the conflict of all the functions, variables, classes, anything that we do over here from any other part of the code जिसको हम बाद में combine करेंगे तो बाद में इस तरह के conflicts ना आए. उसके बाद हमने कहा कि main जो है it's a method और हमने अभी इसको ज़्यादा elaborate हम नहीं करते क्योंकि we haven't got into the portion जहाँ पे हम functions या methods को explain करेंगे. But you need to understand कि this function has a return type of integer which means हमें यहाँ पे इसको support करना पड़ेगा with return 0. Now 0 isn't anything meaningful लेकिन ये आपको error नहीं देगा because the program is expecting int and we are returning int. So ये दोनों चीज़ें match होनी चाहिए. यहाँ पे float अगर ये expect करे so we should be returning a float value. यहाँ पे character हो तो यहाँ पे हम character return करना चाहिए. If the return type is void, so then we may not need to have the return statement at all, but in some compilers it makes sure कि main का जो return type है वो always int हो. So whatever it is वो चीज़ return होगी, but for main just keep it int and return 0. ये parenthesis जो है it defines basically कि main जो है it's a method. अगर हम main के साथ ये ना लगाएं so main can also be confused for a variable क्योंकि हम variables भी इसी तरह से declare कर सकते हैं as you would see later in this video. And then these curly brackets define the body of this function. Whatever we do over here, whatever the statements that we have, they are being labeled over here as main. So when we call main, we mean to run all the instructions or statements that are in the body of this function. So few things that we need to do in order to have variables are variable names. Now there is a particular criteria for naming your variables. There are some hard rules, some soft rules, so let's just talk about the hard rules first. So the first character of your variable name must not be a number or a special character. It may either start with an underscore or any character from A to Z. So this must be the first character of your variable. Secondly, it must be unique, which makes sense because again we may confuse variables if the name is not unique. Or thirdly जो है there must not be a space in the name of a variable. So these are some of the hard rules that you must fulfill in order to name your variable. Then there are some soft rules also. So you may name your variable like let's say size with a capital S. So this is fine with the compiler. आप इस तरह से name कर सकते हैं लेकिन and it's not going to give you any error, but it's not a good practice because generally जब हम variables को name करते हैं, functions को name करते हैं, so we keep the first character as small और फिर हम सारा small में लिखते हैं if it's a single word. Otherwise we use camel notation. So this same variable may either be named as size with a small s, or if it's like a combination of multiple words, so we may say size of square. So अगर नाम बड़ा है, so we can use camel notation like this in order to improve readability, that these are basically 3 words, size of square. So that's how we can name a variable. The next thing that we would like to discuss over here is the type of a variable. So whenever we define a variable, its type must be provided. As we said earlier, C++ is a strict typed language, so therefore if we have to define a variable, let's say A, so we have to provide its type first. So int A, and this is going to define this variable A with the type int. And as it's a statement, a programming statement, so it must end with a semicolon. So that's how we can define a variable where the first thing that we need to do is to provide a type. The type must come from the list of types that we have that are already known to the compiler, and the name must come out of the conventions that we have discussed over here. अगर नेम जो है वो इस इन कन्वेंशंस को फॉलो नहीं करेगा बट दीज वंस, तो आपको एरर मिलेगा. इनको फॉलो नहीं करेगा तो आप कोड किसी के साथ एक्सचेंज करेंगे तो उसकी रीडेबिलिटी जो है वो कम होगी, बिकॉज दीज आर द स्टैंडर्ड्स दैट आर जनरली फॉलोड. सो इस तरह से हम वेरिएबल जो है वो डिक्लेयर कर सकते हैं. ऑफ कोर्स ए इज़ नॉट अ मीनिंगफुल नेम, तो आप वेरिएबल जिस मकसद के लिए यूज़ करेंगे, इफ़ यू आर यूजिंग मोर मीनिंगफुल नेम, तो आप उसको बाद में आपको रिकॉल करना आसान होगा. और ये प्रॉब्लम तब बढ़ेगा जब आपके पास ज़्यादा वेरिएबल्स होंगे. सो रिमेंबरिंग देयर जॉब जस्ट बाय लेबल इज़ गोइंग टू बी वेरी डिफिकल्ट. So you should name them meaningfully, and of course you can make use of the comment section also if the name is not very elaborate. तो आप यहाँ पे mention कर सकते हैं. For example, the variable is holding such and so value. तो इस तरह से आप उसके साथ comments में भी supporting details लिख सकते हैं. So this is the declaration of a variable. The types that we have to declare a variable, जो यहाँ पे हमारे पास different options हैं. So we can have integer as we already used it. Then we have float. So a float is going to use a real value. For example, integer will always store a value, an integer value like 5, 6, 8. So if you are कोई real value store करने में interested हैं like 5.6, 5.87, so we have to make use of float. Then we can use double, and double is basically a bigger version of float जिसका size भी बड़ा है और वो decimal के बाद ज़्यादा points जो है उसको store कर सकता है. So if the value is much larger, तो आप उसके लिए double use कर सकते हैं. The same way we have variants of int also, like short int, long int. तो अगर आपको स्पेस ज़्यादा चाहिए तो आप int से long int पे जा सकते हैं. इफ़ यू नो कि ये वैल्यू किसी खास उस वैल्यू से बड़ी, कि ये वैल्यू किसी खास लिमिट से ऊपर नहीं जाएगी, so then you can make use of short int also. मसलन if you have got like different products in your shop and you know कि उसकी प्राइस जो है वो 100 से ऊपर नहीं जाएगी, so अगर आप उसके लिए int यूज़ करेंगे, that is going to waste some memory, and rather short int is sufficient to do the job. तो इस तरह से हम इनकी efficient utilization जो है वो कर सकते हैं. The same way you can see कि if the values aren't bigger enough, तो आप double की जगह float यूज़ कर सकते हैं. The other data types that we have are Boolean data type. Boolean हम तब यूज़ करते हैं when we need to store a value either as true or false. तो उस value को store करने के लिए we use Boolean, which is like more which use lesser space. तो हम ये better option होगा हमारे लिए for efficient utilization of memory. 0 और 1 से हम represent करते हैं Boolean को. 0 means false, 1 means true. तो of course आप उसके लिए integer values भी यूज़ कर सकते हैं, but since you are not going to need any other value other than any value above 1 or below 0, so इस वजह से अगर आप int यूज़ करेंगे, short int को यूज़ करेंगे, so वो memory आपकी ज़ाया होगी. Bool is just going to take a single bit जिसके अंदर या 0 आएगा या 1 आएगा, and that's going to do the job perfectly without wasting any extra space. So bool can be a type. Then we can have a character that is going to store a character which can be anything like A, B, C, D, or the special characters. Even the numbers at times can also be stored as characters, but of course we won't be able to do arithmetics on it. For example, if I have a character A and I assign 5 to it, so in this case 5 is a character and it's not a number, so हम कोई भी character उसको assign कर सकते हैं. Then we can have string, which is used for storing longer chain of characters. So if we have more characters like in the name of a person, the name of a city, तो उसके लिए हम strings define करते हैं. So these are some of the most frequently used data types that you are going to use for defining your variables. The next thing that you would need is initialization of your variable. So initialization can be done at the time of declaration. For example, if you write A is equal to 5, so you have declared your variable over here as labeled A and type integer and you have initialized it with 5. So initialization is basically the first value that this variable is going to get. तो इसको हमने 5 से initialize कर दिया है. Initialization can be done at the later stages also. For example, int b, so we have just declared the variable and then b is equal to 6 and we have assigned it a value in the separate statement. So again we have initialized it or given it a starting value of 6. According to some, it's not initialization if you don't do it in the declaration statement. It's just an assignment, but whatever the way you take it, it's going to assign the value of 6 to b. And then if you need a variable, just use its label and its value is going to be made available to you. So if I say a, let's say if I want to print it, so that is going to print the value that this a currently holds. So that was pretty much what you need to know in order to use these variables. So let's just write some code and see how it works. Int a, so as we said, we have declared a. Let's see if we print a what it gives us. We haven't initialized it, so it hasn't given us any error, but it has picked a garbage value. हमने कोई इसको initialize नहीं किया, तो जो value वहाँ पे पहले से पड़ी हुई थी वो value आ गई. So therefore अगर आप ये काम करेंगे, so the program is going to behave unexpectedly. So therefore it's very important कि आप declaration के अंदर initialize करें या बाद में करें like this, but you must give a starting value to your variable ताकि वो आपके प्रोग्राम के मुताबिक अपडेट होता रहे. So that's how we have declared a variable. We have initialized it with 0, or you may say assigned 0 to it. We can do both in a single statement, as we said earlier, like let's say float b equal to 6.3. So we have declared and initialized a variable. So we can define a character type of variable. Let's call it C, and C may hold a character value. Character value provide करने के लिए we use single quotes, and let's say the value is y. So we have a variable named C which is holding a value y. And as I said earlier, we can assign declaration and initialization of character variable. As I said earlier, we can assign numbers to it as well. अच्छा, next हमें bool की ज़रूरत पड़ सकती है. So bool d, and if we say 0, so that is false, and 1 is for true. So we can provide it 0 and 1 just like we do in integer type of variable, but the good thing about bool is that it only stores 0 and 1 and therefore just consumes 1 bit. So that was about using Boolean variables. If we provide 0 to it, so that would mean the same as false. 0 for false and 1 is for true. Let's use the type double also. So double E, and we can assign a value like this to it, and that would be and it can store such a value. Float might not store these much digits after the decimal point. So if that is the case, you may make use of double. So that's how we can declare, initialize, and call our variables if we want to print any of these variables. So let's say we are interested in using the value of C, so we can print it, and that says y. So the value that was present over there is being recalled, and this insertion operator has provided it to the output stream and it's being printed on the screen. So that's how we can declare variables, initialize them, assign different values to them, and print them. Any value that you provide to a variable other than its first value is what we call assignment, and assignment is being done with this assignment operator. So just like y was the first value of C, so we call it initialization, but any other value after this, for example, if we say C and we this time assign a value of Z to it, so this isn't initialization anymore, and this is what we call variable assignment. So any other value that this variable gets after the first value is assignment. So the same way we can assign different values to these variables, and the value keeps on changing, and each time you need the value, for example over here we need it for printing, so it's going to bring the latest value that it currently holds. So basically what happens in the background is that when you declare a variable, say int a equal to 5, so you have named this variable as a, so this is what we call label. So name is basically the label, and this label knows the address in memory where this 5 value is stored. So since the type is integer, so an integer space which is like 4 bytes or maybe 6 is being assigned to this label. So we have a label a, and a points to this address जहाँ पे 5 की value पड़ी हुई है. So we do not need to recall or remember the address, we just need to know a, and that is sufficient, and a is basically holding the address जहाँ पे ये 5 value पड़ी है. So whenever we do something like a is equal to a plus 1, so that is going to get the value in this location, which in this case is 5, उसमें 1 plus करेगा और उसको फिर यहाँ पे update कर देगा. So यहाँ पे मेमोरी में उसको 6 वैल्यू असाइन हो जाएगा. सो आप जो भी अर्थमेटिक इसके साथ अप्लाई करेंगे, ए को जो भी मेमोरी लोकेशन मिली है उसकी वैल्यू जो है वो कॉन्टिन्यूसली अपडेट होती रहेगी, और जब भी आपको उसकी वैल्यू चाहिए होगी और आप उसको रिट्रीव करेंगे, सो उस पॉइंट पे जो भी अपडेटेड वैल्यू होगी आपको वो वैल्यू मिलेगी. सो द प्रीवियस वैल्यूज आर बीइंग रिप्लेस्ड. सो लेट्स सी कि हमारे जो वेरिएबल्स हैं उनको मेमोरी में कहाँ पे स्पेस मिली है. एज यू कैन सी हमने ए वेरिएबल बनाया एंड वी हैव इनिशियलाइज्ड इट विद 0. So let's see कि memory में 0 कहाँ पे पड़ा है. If we say let's just get rid of this statement, so we are going to have just this only cout statement which is printing a, that is the value, and we also want to know कि ये value कहाँ पे पड़ी है. So I'm using this string literal just to separate the value from the address, and in order to get its address I'm using this operator ampersand and a. So ampersand a is going to give me the address that is associated with this label. So let's see what it prints. Okay, so as we use this as a separator, so the value that we have at that address is 0, and this is the particular address in memory जहाँ पे ये 0 पड़ा हुआ है. So इस तरह से हर वेरिएबल को एक एड्रेस असाइन हुआ होता है. सो ये एड्रेस है, इस एड्रेस जो है ये ए के साथ लिंक्ड है, एंड व्हेनेवर यू से ए, सो ए गोज टू दिस एड्रेस, उस पर जो वैल्यू पड़ी होती है दैट वैल्यू इज बीइंग एक्सेस्ड फॉर द पर्पस ऑफ अपडेशन और जस्ट रिट्रीवल. So that was all about variables, and next we are going to look into performing some arithmetics on these variables.